to everyone in the remote team and community. It's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to present my perspective on responsible tourism and from a point of view of a travel designer. Let me just do the technical bit and get the screen shared. Right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so to start off with just a little background and my journey to becoming a sabbatical travel designer. It's something that's been lingering in me probably since childhood, and after a very unfulfilling few years or brief career in the world of finance, I chucked it in and set off to explore Latin America. And so in the early 2000s, my first big trip or sabbatical and the mindset of a sabbatical travel designer was born. And on this trip, I had four main goals, really: to see every country in Latin America, to travel as slowly as possible, to travel over land, because I knew that seeing things from the road would be far more fulfilling, and I love those moments of calm, passing through the unknown towns, seeing people's faces, and the snapshot of daily life, of real life going on. I also love that feeling of being disconnected from everything and just watching the world go by. And number four, I wanted to get involved in local projects where I could give back using my education, knowledge, experience, life skills to what extent I had back then. And with a focus on either nature, wildlife, people, and find a project which is run from the heart, run on the shoestring, where I could see where the funds were going, where the help provided was clearly used to fund the project, and where you could learn more about a country in a more deeper, more immersive way. And so the level of detail I put into planning my own trip is pretty extreme, and I've never stopped with that approach to the travel design I bring to my clients at LiNGER and for those that I've worked with over the last 15 to 20 years. And that's no matter the budget. I plan with the sort of following mantra: looking at every trip with a clean slate, looking at ways to do things differently, looking at detail in maps, as you can guarantee that the B or C road is going to be more interesting than the standard route given by Google Maps. Working out the route that's most suitable for a client and ensuring contrast and variety with every move, and not just box ticking. I also like to push the comfort zone boundaries with some of the life experiences and activities, and again to support small projects throughout the trip, which fall under the categories of accommodation or activity, where there's a connection to community and culture and wildlife. Knowing, I think, therefore, that the proportion of the money spent on the trip is going to directly benefit someone or something. That's the wrong way. No. So in terms of client profiles, over the years I've worked on the basis of quality over quantity, and so the number of trips I've handled each year is probably no more than 30 to 40, and quite honestly, this is enough. The way I plan requires such a level of detailed questioning and research that more would be a disservice to me, to my brand, and of course to the client. And the typical client I work with is a true traveller at heart, a private individual or family, ranging from those with a more modest budget to those with an extremely high budget. But they all share the sense of wanting to see the world in a meaningful way, venturing off the beaten path with real life encounters and experiences as a means to understand the country. Ultimately, they want to enrich their lives and the destinations they're visiting through travel. Many have a corporate background, some have reached the top of their game and are taking a time out, others are taking a career break. Almost all are in need of reconnecting with themselves, with their families, and disconnecting from technology. A sabbatical would typically be anything longer than a month, averaging 2 to 3 months, but that said, there's no fixed rule, of course, and I've been involved with trips that are over a year in duration, or where a client has divided this time into 2 to 3 mini sabbaticals. One statistic I found, which I thought was quite interesting, was that according to a Skift report in 2019, 67% of high-income travellers said they would rather spend their money on activities than nicer hotel room. And this has certainly been the case when allocating trip budget on a sabbatical. And when the question of sustainability and the environment comes up in conversation, I've often found that a significant portion of clients haven't really considered the sustainability factor when making their travel choices. And so it becomes my responsibility, or the travel designer or the tour operators, to raise that awareness and bring it into the conversation. How does a sabbatical travel become purposeful and benefit responsible tourism? And firstly, I'd like to define responsible tourism. In particular, I like the definition offered by CREST, which is the Centre for Responsible Travel, who state that responsible tourism maximizes the benefits to local communities, minimizes negative social or environmental impacts, and helps local people conserve fragile cultures and habitats. If I apply this to the sabbatical concept, some of the standout features include the slow travel and the luxury of time. In fact, the time element is the greatest luxury on a sabbatical trip, and far more important than the traditional concept of luxury being accommodation, flying first class, or what have you. The traveller really can slow down, which in turn means longer stays, deeper immersion, connecting with the destination, openness to trying new experiences which have a direct impact on a community or help to protect a fragile area. Another part of the sabbatical concept is traveling by any means, and so there's no rush to fly everywhere, and taking the road less traveled using local transport from tuk-tuks to buses and trains. Sabbaticals also support emerging destinations or those in a state of under-tourism and spread the distribution of the tourist dollar. It actually amazes me that places I visited 25 years ago, which were major highlights, are seldom part of an itinerary even these days. And places like Semuc Champaign, Guatemala, Corn Islands in Nicaragua, Providencia in Colombia, the Oki Valley in Chile, the Chaco in Bolivia and Paraguay, Pacific coast of Ecuador, all of these, I think, could fall under the category of under-tourism in areas which certainly suffer perhaps from over-tourism. It also, sabbatical travel gives the opportunity to unearth the little known accommodation gems, and taking the route less traveled, we're forced to research new routes, new road trips, new destinations, and in the process often find a simple little posada, which is a truly memorable place to stay. It may not have the infinity pool or spa or the high thread count Egyptian sheets, but it's got an unparalleled view, a 5-star location, and it's run by a passionate family who it's nice to support. And when travelers stay longer, travel slower, they'll be doing more to support the destination, spending in local restaurants, visiting remote, harder to reach regions, embracing a challenging road trip to experience somewhere that far fewer can achieve on a standard 1 or 2 week trip. And this in turn gives the local community, I feel, a sense of purpose to where they belong, to the languages or local dialect they may speak, and preserving their traditional arts, culture, cuisine, traditions and beliefs. The hope is that they won't be drawn by the potentially misleading allure of the big city, and so culture, community and that sense of belonging is preserved. And finally, the sabbatical does give the opportunity to give back and get involved, and that brings me on to my next slide with giving back and the power of giving back. And I'll use my experiences as examples. When in Belize and Guatemala, I worked with 2 tiny NGOs involved in microfinance projects as a means to enrich the local community. And getting involved with the village baker on the outskirts of Granada in Nicaragua was one of the most humbling and rewarding things I've ever done. With the luxury of time, adapting my mindset and building a connection with the family with whom I was able to advise and help in a way that benefited them economically as well as their community. And Doña Elvia, who's in the image there, was seen as a model example within her community, which inspired others to start new ventures. And these were microloans of about $50 with payback of around $1 a week, which in turn taught them discipline in saving, taught that borrowed money had to be repaid as opposed to just a donation. And it meant the family could adapt and change the way they worked by purchasing new equipment. Talking with Doña Elvia about the economics of having to increase prices, as she couldn't sustain selling a pastel for 2.5 Cordobas any longer, was quite the hurdle. And when she finally agreed agreed to increase her prices to 3/4, together with the increase in volume from the purchase of new equipment, she could finally see that the loan created a more sustainable model for her micro business. And people in her community were starting to learn from her approach, which spurred new ideas from others coming up with requests for microloans and motivating them to work harder and think more creatively. This very tight-knit community started to embrace the help of others, of Western visitors, not to look at them with their hands out for donations, but their skills, but how their skill sets could help them in the long term. And in the other work I did, it was near a remote jungle in Cochabamba in Bolivia, and I worked with a wildlife rescue center, which was probably the most challenging thing I've ever done. It pushed me way out of my comfort zone, and as someone who really doesn't like the jungle or bugs or humid climates, spending a couple of weeks here was a definite physical and mental challenge. And when I was asked to care for an ocelot, the first question was, what's an ocelot? And it really did push me to my limits. But this poor creature called Boadicea had been so badly treated, it had such a spitting hatred of fear of humans, and rightly so. It was in such a state that it couldn't be rewilded, but the purpose was to give it a life of some dignity for the time that she had left, and treat her in a way that, in the hope that she may not have the same fear of humans. And so after spending 10 hours a day with her for 2 weeks, she no longer tried to scratch me when I brought her food, no longer hissed at me when I turned up each morning, and no longer tried to attack me when I took her for a walk. And in fact, I remember one particular afternoon being totally caught off guard, dozing in a hammock, and she climbed on top of me for a cuddle. And it was the result of a connection that we'd sort of made. And in all honesty, I was terrified, but could see that the change in temperament and how she adapted to the presence of people. So spending enough time in a place and getting involved for long enough in something like this brought positive care, protection, and of course the ultimate goal with wildlife is often to release animals. In contrast, I know that there's many sanctuaries around the world which are created purely for tourism, financial gain, set up like a zoo. So finding the genuine ones who have the welfare of the animal at the core of their existence, not the profit, is important. Over the years, I've seen an ever-increasing number of sabbatical clients ask about ways they can get involved in local projects as a means to use their skill set and knowledge, from teaching English to citizen science in areas of conservation to day activities. And one example is Proyecto Oasis in Costa Rica, which I particularly like. And I took a family there, and it was the child's 11th birthday, and he spent it mucking out the animal cages. But for the family, is that what they would normally do? No, but as a sort of educational thing of showing the family, the kids, something different, and getting them involved, it gave them a purpose, and it helped the project. So I think encompassing some tangible element on a trip where the client is doing something to get involved is a step in the right direction. And so moving on to the do's and don'ts, and again, this is very much my perspective as a designer, but from seeing a lot of countries around the world across a number of continents, what I've learned is, in terms of the do's, is keep it simple and keep it authentic. Embrace the random and quirky, and seek out local personalities who are clearly good with people and want to be with people and visitors. The individual in the photo here is Doña Olga, who lives in a little village in Bajos del Toro in Costa Rica. And the experience here couldn't be simpler or more authentic, because it's just a visit to her little shop, but you get to interact with her. And she serves the local community. She teaches you in Spanish how to make tortillas and a café de olla in the traditional way that you see in rural Costa Rican homes. And that's it. It's a taste of real life. And this is what travelers love to see. Because in reality, you're not just going to walk into someone's home. But when it's unstaged and it's authentic like this, it's real. And she gets a little financial gesture for her time. Tourists typically purchase a few things. And over time, she's used that increase in revenue to refit her kitchen. In terms of the don'ts, the list could have been longer, but I'll sort of summarize them with don't overstage it, because it always becomes very evident if something's been overly created and immediately loses its authenticity. We've all seen that. Don't overpromise. I've talked to many an eco-lodge or so-called eco-lodge over the years who have purchased some local furniture, a couple of pieces, and all of a sudden they're classifying themselves as eco-lodges. There's far more to it, of course. Don't make locals or visitors feel awkward, and certain cultures are and should be preserved and kept private. I think there's no need to force visitors on them, especially in the sense of the half-day or day visit. The mutual feeling of not wanting to be there and locals not wanting this type of tourism. We probably all experienced the awkward folkloric dance done as a daily touristic ritual. That there's nothing natural about this for a timid tribal culture, for example. Don't greenwash, the often used term, but be honest and acknowledge imperfections and possible hypocrisy, because there's a lot of it, especially some of the components, I think, in luxury travel, trying to show off green credentials. However, ultimately, I think doing something is better than doing nothing. And finally, don't adapt things to suit Western tastes or customs. And visitors want to see the real deal, and the locals should be left to practice their customs and beliefs in the most authentic of ways. Adapting something to tone it down would be best not to operate it at all, and just keep it for a handful of tourists who are up for it. In terms of the new normal as travel resumes and new approaches, we don't know the future, but we do know the world has changed, and we have to consider that in our approach to travel design. Future travel requires us to encourage more social impact tourism without taking away the fun of travel or the element of holiday. Travel is about making a change from work and home life to distress, and not feel, at the same time, you don't want to feel that overwhelming guilt of flying somewhere. And so merging holidays with purpose and mindset to create a life-enriching trip is my goal as a travel designer. My thoughts on new approaches and things that I'll continue to do is slow the pace of travel, encouraging longer stays with the notion that time is the ultimate luxury, avoiding one-night stays in places unless absolutely necessary. No matter the trip length, I think more time somewhere gives travellers the opportunity to tread a path less travelled, and with that it brings higher level of trip satisfaction. I'll also encourage visitors to return to a country for second visits, and if you think about the world, countries like France, Italy, Portugal, Spain, the US, UK, etc., we receive countless visitors a number of times, and we tend to look at Latin America as well as elsewhere as a destination that's visited once in a lifetime. I think it would be good to change this mindset. Encouraging a second visit to countries to go beyond the Machu Picchu trail will help areas in under-tourism and ensure money is more evenly distributed. Another feature, I think, avoid country hopping. This in part due to COVID complications, but also as a way to encourage travellers to go deeper within one country and not look at certain countries as an add-on. Don't combine countries just because that's the way things were done in the past, such as Honduras tagged on as an add-on to Guatemala, Uruguay tagged on as an add-on to Argentina. All these smaller nations in Latin America have so much to see and experience individually, and this should be encouraged. Avoiding bucket lists. The standard box ticking highlights mentality goes out the window, and it gives us as travel designers an opportunity to showcase a destination on a far deeper level to support the lesser known regions and emerging destinations, supporting periphery destinations to a major attraction as well. And supporting emerging and new destinations. We manage the expectations as travel designers to prepare the travelers, but it amazes me that in the Guyana's Kaito Falls, which is one of the greatest natural spectacles I've ever seen, received just over 8,000 visitors in 2019. Machu Picchu, in contrast, can see over 6,000 on a busy day. I'd like to see to encourage more accommodation variety, from homestays to bell tents. The responsible traveller wants variety, no matter the budget. I think we have to get out of the mindset that just because someone has the wealth and likes Four Seasons hotels, that's the trip accommodation should be like that throughout. In fact, most clients I work with want the variety and different experiences that contrasting accommodation styles provide. And finally, economic transparency, which is possibly the most complicated. I think we're going to see a greater need for economic transparency across the board in tourism amongst travel designers, DMCs, ground handlers, hotels. It's as travellers want to know where their money ends up and how a trip is allocated. It doesn't mean we need to excessively overcomplicate breakdowns, but I think highlighting certain components is a positive move. And some examples I've come across, Origins Lodge in Costa Rica, they take a service charge, which is given to the staff, but it's given under the premise it's spent wisely. And so to monitor this, the employees present some kind of self-improvement or home improvement plan, which in turn is helping them educate the staff financially and provides benefits to the family and beyond with it from the extra income. G Adventures have introduced a ripple score tool, which shows what percentage of a tour's local spend remains in the local economy. Fogo Island Inn in Canada, which some of you may know, introduced an economic nutrition certification mark, which breaks up the cost of a room night into labour, food and room supplies, commission and fees, operations, admin, sales and marketing, and the surplus then reinvested in the local community. As a final note, from a point of view of a travel designer, if we work with the concept of experiential travel being a positive for responsible tourism, on the meaningful experiences and purposeful activities, as well as the benefits to mental, physical health, we can design trips which bring benefit to all, from the traveller to the destination's fragile environment, wildlife and cultural preservation, as well as jobs and economic growth. So collectively, by all doing a little, we're doing a lot. And I particularly liked Antonis Petropolis from Eco Club's quotation here: in an era of climate crisis and mass migration, leaving no footprint is no longer enough. Responsible tourists should leave solidarity footprints behind. We need positive, progressive impact tourism.
Great, Steve. I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Steve, that was very elucidating. Thank you so much. So Ligia, please follow with your question. I guess this was very straight to the point, very transparent. I'm still digesting all the information. So thank you so much for bringing it up in such a powerful perspective. I think Ligia is gonna summarize maybe one of the questions which is there on the air, I think, and inside the heads of everyone.
I wanted to ask you about like what we see as greenwash. Do you feel like your clients see you as an advocate to guarantee they won't be buying something that is greenwashed?
I think they know. We don't make it too much of a conversation piece, and but the rapport I have, the understanding, the brand, the type of travel I promote, and many who I've worked with before, there's a trust element there. And I'll give an example. I've actually, one of the few trips I've operated in this last year and a half was a true professional in the green eco world, with an entire career built around it. But it didn't once come up in the conversation when planning the trip. She just knew that the right properties would be selected and the right sort of route, the right type of travel. And so, you know, I didn't try and bring it up, and obviously not greenwashing, but it wasn't a case of having to force the subject. There was just a depth of understanding that the trip would be planned as responsibly as possible.
I agree. I think it's a much more of a topic that you act on it better than talk about it. So as you, this is a common shared value, I believe, with you and your clients. Not something that needs to be mentioned, but does add value to the relationship, and
absolutely,
as a reason for why they look out for you.
Definitely.
Steve, it's Stuart Whittington here from Journey Latin America.
Excuse
me not putting my camera on because my internet's playing up quite a lot this week. I just wanted to say that I really liked your comment. I thought your presentation was fantastic. I particularly liked your comments about sustainability often not being considered by the customer and it being a travel designer's responsibility to bring it up. I think well, I'd concur that a lot of people do expect us to be thinking about it, and we need to present it to them in the right way. And our partners, and I know, Steve, that you work with many of the great guys within the remote community who do have projects. It's about us pointing people in the right direction, but also getting fed great opportunities, told about great opportunities, some of which we're going to hear about from Petite, I know, at Sole Luna. I just wanted to kind of really say I completely agree that it's our responsibility as travel designers to try to encourage our customers to be traveling better.
Exactly, yeah, I agree. And the encouragement is the key thing, because I think, and it's timing it right, you know, launching into a sort of lecturing approach on that first call is you know, putting a sense of guilt on someone for wanting to go somewhere, which can happen with some of the, you know, the information that's out there. There's a lot of it. Ultimately, they want a holiday, but as you gradually introduce new concepts to it, new experiences, which have a notion of, you know, they're supporting something, that's what they appreciate. And this will only grow because it's such early stages for this sort of travel and the mindset that I think we've embraced it as an industry, but it's, you know, a long way to go with the client point of view. And, you know, we do it with the luxury end or the, you know, the experiential travel side of things, but it'd be nice to see it spread into more mass tourism.
New times, new perspectives, huh?
Yeah.
Guys, again, thank you so much. I guess Steve brought all the dimensions from the educational to the economic to the emotional